Good evening. My name is Catherine, and I work with SEB Housing. This is the information session, excuse me, for the 76 affordable rental units that are going to be offered at the Belstead in North Attleborough. So the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the available apartments. I'll also cover the application, the eligibility and lottery processes, and then what to expect after the lottery is run. So if you have any questions during this session, or if you're watching it after the fact, there's a couple ways to get in touch with us. If you're in this session right now, you're watching it live, you're encouraged to either type your question into the Zoom chat function, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. When you came in to this call, you were muted just to minimize any outside noise, but you're welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation. If you're watching this after the fact, this is going to be posted to our YouTube channel after tonight. And if you have any questions for us after tonight, the best way or the easiest way to get in touch with us is emailing info@sebhousing.com. So just for some quick background information on who we are. So SEB Housing, we are an off-site affordable housing consulting group. We are not the on-site management team, but we've been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, and we'll also be the ones to collect and review applications to determine an applicant's eligibility for the lottery. So in the initial phases, we're your main point of contact, but then further along in the process, the on-site management team will be taking over as your main point of contact. And a couple of the on-site staff are with us today. So Dana and Mitchell are on the call. So there's a few of you on here, I know too. So if you have any questions, I'm going to open up the floor now. Just if you have any specific questions about the property, maybe you've reviewed the information packet that we have, and there was just some question that you had that was not in there. I'll give you an opportunity now to ask the management staff over at the Belstead. So I'm going to actually flip the slides over here to just some information on the apartments. But if there's any questions, let us know. And then, of course, Dana or Mitchell, if you have anything that you want to add that you want to make sure is out there, now's your chance.
Nothing from me, but happy to answer any questions.
Great.
Yeah, nothing for me either, but very excited and also happy to answer any questions you guys might have about the Belstead.
Great. Yeah, if there's no questions yet, I'll just continue on, but just wanted to let you guys know that they're here, and I'll move on to kind of the lottery process, the eligibility process. Like I said, SEB Housing will be your main point of contact early on, but then after the lottery, if you're one of the top households on the waiting list, you will eventually be in touch with the staff over at the Belstead to get your lottery application run and all of that. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to go to sebhousing.com and select I want to rent, because if you select I want to rent, there's going to be a page specific to the Belstead, and you'll be taken to a page with a downloadable version of the application, the information packet, which has a lot of the info that I'm going to be going through tonight, and then also a jot form. So you can see this link here. This is the online application link. So we encourage everyone to complete the online application because it is going to be the quickest way to ensure that your application is received right away. And once you send the lottery application, or once you complete the online application, you're going to receive a confirmation email instantaneously letting you know that it was received. If for any reason the online application is not something that you're able to do or want to do, there is, like I said, that downloadable version of the lottery application. Or you can request a paper application from SEB. So there's several ways to submit it to us, either online or in person or via email. And those options are listed on the first page of the paper application as well. The application's fairly brief. You don't need to submit supporting income, asset, or tax documentation to get into the lottery. So this is early in the process. You won't need to submit any of that. You're just self-reporting your income as best you can on this application, and you will be entered into the lottery based off of what you're self-reporting. And then later on in the process, after the lottery, like I said, if you're one of those top households on the waiting list, you will be asked to submit your income, asset, and tax documentation at that point. As you can see on the screen, applications are due by 2 p.m. on July 20th. The reason it's very specific and says 2 o'clock is because the online application is going to be disabled by 2 p.m. So it won't be active after that point. You do need to get your application in if you're filling it in online before 2 o'clock on that day. I know there's some questions coming in through the chat here. So, oh, and Dana, you already jumped in. Great. In terms of parking, just for anybody who's listening only, the question was, it says there's one free parking spot. What if we have 2 cars? And the answer is there's 1 car per person. And there would be 2 cars or 2 spots, I guess, allowable if there was 2 people in the household. So it was a parking question there that I just wanted to read through for anybody who doesn't have their screen up. So one other thing too, before I go on to the next information I have here, you don't need to be a resident of North Attleborough to apply for this lottery. There are going to be some affordable units that have local preference tied to them, which I'll talk more about in just a few minutes, but that shouldn't dissuade you at all from being or from applying for this lottery if you don't live in the area or in the town. All right, so the apartments are going to be available soon, and a lot of the information is on your screen here, but there are 38 one-bedrooms that are going to rent for $1,642. There are 32 two-bedrooms that are going to rent for $1,814, and there are 6 three-bedrooms which will rent for $1,984. I'll talk more about how those rents are set in just a few minutes, but just to give you an overview of the community. So there are some great outdoor amenities at the community, including a pool, a dog park, community gardens, fire pits, and grilling stations outside. Indoors, there's a fitness center, a clubhouse lounge, and co-working stations, among other things. And the apartments themselves have modern features like quartz countertops, central air condition, walk-in closets, quality appliances. There's a stacked washer and dryer in each unit, so not a laundry room, but it's right in your unit, and there's keyless entry. Pets are permitted, maximum of 2 pets per apartment, and there is that 1 free parking space, like I mentioned. Tenants are going to pay utilities, so electric, heat, cooking, hot water, electricity, water, sewer will all be sub-metered to your apartment. So the affordable rents, they're not set in accordance with a applicant's financial circumstances. So it's not like a subsidized program like Section 8 that you might be familiar with. And what that means is the rents are not going to change if your income changes. So these are set rents. And for this housing program, the rents are set using a formula based off of HUD, which is the Federal Housing and Urban Development, off of HUD's area median income for the Providence, New Bedford area, which is where North Attleborough falls. The rents could increase once per year, but that's typically around when HUD revises their AMIs each spring, so those area median incomes. And advance notice would always be given to any residents if there is going to be a rent increase, and rents would never change in the middle of your term. So if you signed a lease, say for August 1st or for September, your rent would be the same for until at least September of 2027. And so since we know there's going to be more interested applicants and eligible applicants than there are available units, that's why the apartments are being made available through this lottery process. And households are eligible for the lottery if their income is at or below 80% of the area median income for the area. So the amounts for 80% of AMI are on your screen here. And if you have any questions on anything that I just talked about too with the property, like I said, let us know during the call, but I'll move on to eligibility. So there's 4 eligibility requirements for this affordable housing program. The first is that your income is at or below that 80% of the maximum income limit. So and I'll come back to that in just a minute, but the second thing to keep in mind too is that for eligibility purposes, household priority is going to be given to or based off of your household composition. So for example, if you're a 1-person household, or a couple that shares a bedroom, so you really only are utilizing 1 room, 1 bedroom, you're generally going to be considered a type 1 household, or what the program refers to as a type 1 household. So you can apply for a 2-bedroom apartment, but the larger type 2 and type 3 households are going to be placed ahead of you on the waiting list. And some examples of a type 2 or type 3 household would be households with 3 or 4 people, as well as some 2-person households. In the information packet, there's a lot more information on household types and the breakdown. Basically, when you fill out your application, your lottery application, you're going to indicate which of the household types with the descriptions that are listed in the application apply to you. And then we'll be reviewing that to confirm that you have, selected your correct household type based off of the program guidelines. Another eligibility criteria is that households or applicants can't own a home prior to your program certification. So if you own a home now, it would need to be sold prior to completing your program certification with SCB Housing. And that program certification would come after the lottery, but it would be before you're leasing an apartment. So you would need to, like I said, sell the property, get off the deed, kind of in short order to be able to apply. And then the last eligibility criteria that I was going to mention doesn't come up very often, but if you have financial interest in the development, so maybe you work for the developer, you're part of the property management team, you'd be considered a related party and you wouldn't be eligible for this lottery opportunity. So just keep that in mind. But to circle back on the first eligibility criteria and explain more about income limits. So since these are affordable units that are going to be made available to rent at prices that are a lot lower than identical or very similar units within the building, they're only going to be made available to households who actually qualify for the affordable housing program. So like I said, you don't need to submit any supporting documentation at this stage to apply for the lottery, but I do want you to be aware of how your income is going to be calculated when we are looking at your finances later on. So for this program, all income coming into the household is counted. And that includes, bonuses, overtime, any income coming into the household. The only 2 exceptions are if you have a minor in your household, maybe you have a 16-year-old who's working and earning a wage, we are not going to count their total their wages. And also dependent full-time students. So maybe you have a 20-year-old college student who's working, we would only count the first $480 of their wages when determining your total household income. But other than that, it is all income that we need to count. It's also the gross income, unfortunately, for a lot of people, not the net income, so the amount you make before taxes on your pay stub. Although most of us are not taking home the amount that's listed on our pay stub. But that is the program regulation. And how we calculate income isn't one size fits all because everybody's income circumstances are unique. So some applicants have a weekly salary that's very consistent throughout the year, maybe biweekly, But there's other people who are working seasonally or self-employed. So in those circumstances, we may need to look further back into the past to be able to project what your income is over the next 12 months. Because that's what the program wants us to do, is to project what your total household income is for the next 12 months. So in general, any income that you have been making or any jobs that were listed on your tax returns last year, we're going to assume that you're still making that income. So if you are not, we would need some sort of definitive documentation from you to confirm that you're no longer, working at that previous job or whatever it might be. When you're filling out your application, just make sure that you're listing all of your income and assets. So not just wages, but if you have Social Security income coming in, unemployment, pension, anything like that. Make sure that it's listed on the application so there isn't a lot. There will be back and forth regardless to verify, but we just want to minimize that as much as possible. There's no I'm going to go back to this slide, and I'm going to confuse you for just a second because of what this says, but there's no minimum income for this rental opportunity according to the affordable housing program. However, most management teams, including the team over at the Belstead, wants to make sure that tenants can afford the rent, regardless of whether or not the apartment is a market rate apartment or an affordable apartment. So the management company has set a minimum household income equivalent to approximately 2.5 times the monthly rent. So those amounts are listed here. So if you're looking to rent a 1-bedroom apartment, your total household income would need to be above $49,260, approximately, and no more than, if you're a 1-person household, no more than $62,800. So you need to be within that range. If you're a 2-person household that's looking to rent a 1-bedroom, you would be between $49,200 and $71,800. So that's how you're reading that. The only households who can just completely disregard the minimum income amounts because they don't apply is if you have a Section 8 or other voucher, like an MRVP voucher. So that's because the agency that administers your voucher is going to be paying a portion of your rent, so you don't need to meet that minimum income amount. It is going to be the leasing office at the Belstead that eventually is making the determination as to whether or not your income is enough for their minimum income requirements. So it's possible that you could have your total household income could be a little bit below the $49,200 that you're seeing there. If the assets that you have, the liquid assets, can be tapped into to pay the rent. But like I said, this is going to be up to the leasing office as to whether or not your household meets their minimum income requirements. That's why it says approximate, but the maximum income limits set by the Affordable Housing Program are set in stone. So if your total household income was $1 above these maximum income limits, you would be determined to be ineligible and over income, unfortunately. There is no asset limit for affordable rental opportunities. So you can have a significant amount of assets. You might be retired, you have bank accounts and retirement accounts and all of that, and that's fine. Even though there's no asset limit, SCB Housing does still need to collect information related to your assets. So we'll be asking after the lottery for bank statements and all of that. If you have a 401k, it is the net cash value that would be wanting to see. So like I said, there's no asset limit, but anything that is earning interest, that interest could be added to your total household income. For most people, that's not a whole lot of interest coming out of their assets. Again, any questions on the eligibility criteria or anything like that, please let me know. Because I'm going to move on to the lottery eligibility and kind of what happens during the lottery, after the lottery now. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, please let us know. And like I said, if you're interested in this opportunity, we encourage you to apply as soon as possible to get the process started. And I do want to mention too, if you're interested in more than one unit size, you can apply for multiple unit sizes. So if you think you might be interested in both a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom, for example, you should indicate that on your application. There's no downside to doing that, but if you only list, say you're interested in a 1-bedroom and you decide later you actually would have considered a 2-bedroom, you might need to be further down or at the end of the waiting list if you want to change that after the lottery. So just apply for any of them that you think you might be interested in. So we're going to review your lottery application and contact you if any information appears to be missing or incorrect. You'll have a chance to resubmit it before the lottery and all of that. If you're completing the lottery application online, I mentioned you're going to get that automatic confirmation email that's going to be shot right back at you to confirm that we received your application. That doesn't mean that SCB Housing has already reviewed your application for at all, because it will take us about a week or two to get to your application and review it in full to confirm that nothing's missing. So just know that you'll receive a more personalized email from SCB Housing after that automatic email confirmation. So if you're found to be eligible for the lottery, you're going to be sent an email with your lottery application number. Your lottery application number is in the form of a series of numbers. So that's not a ranking of any sort. It's just a number that's going to be called during the lottery. We're not going to call, first and last names or anything during the lottery for privacy purposes. So that number just corresponds with the order in which we approved your application. So if you were the very first person to submit a complete application for the Belstead, your number is going to be A.001, for example. In that email that has your lottery application number, it's also going to confirm your household, confirm whether or not your household reported that you were a resident of North Attleborough, or if you have a household member who works full-time within the town, or if you have a child attending North Attleborough Public Schools. So that would mean that you are potentially eligible for a local preference. So make sure that you're completing the application correctly and indicating that you have local preference. And if you don't have local preference, that you're not completing that mistakenly, because it could affect your position on waiting lists if after the fact you actually say, oh, I filled that out incorrectly. I don't have a lease that can prove that I live in the town. Because like I said, there are some units that are going to have local preference on the waiting list, which just means that for some units, households who have local preference will have a higher placement on the waiting list than similarly sized households. So if you're a type 1 household who has local preference on some of those waiting lists, you will have a higher position than the type 1 household who doesn't have local preference. But that's not the case for all units. That email that you get from us with the application number is also going to confirm whether or not you needed a disabled or mobility accessible apartment, because applicants who need the special features of the accessible units are going to have priority for them over households who don't require the accessible units. And then finally, there's going to be a documentation requirements guide or link attached to that email, and that's really just a guide that provides information or more detail on what is going to be asked of you after the lottery if you're one of the top households on the waiting list. So how many pay stubs you should be prepared to send in and all of that kind of thing. If at any point during the process you're found to be ineligible, so maybe you're over income according to the email you're sent, you'll be informed. You're obviously encouraged to contact SCB Housing with any questions. There may, a lot of times we have people who, have a typo when they're completing an online application. You might have added a 0 to your wages or something like that. And so if you think that your ineligibility notice is inaccurate, please let us know. The lottery itself is going to take place on August 4th. It's going to be very similar to this session because it's going to be a Zoom meeting, and it's going to be a screen share. Like I'm screen sharing this information on your screen now, but I'm going to be showing you the lottery drawing. So the lottery will be conducted using a website called random.org. So that allows us for instantaneous results. Instead of drawing numbers from a box, we're going to be using a computer to randomize the lottery application numbers on the screen. And the results of the drawing will be shared with attendees. During the actual lottery drawing, all numbers are going to be drawn or picked. And sometimes when you think of lotteries, you might think, there's 76 units, so they're going to pick 76 lottery application numbers, but that's not the way that these lotteries work. The purpose of the lottery is to establish an order of priority on the waiting lists. So in general, it's going to be more beneficial if your number is placed early, but it's not necessarily going to be the deciding factor as to whether or not you're moving forward in the process to at least one of the units, because we do still need to sort the results after the lottery drawing. So what I mean by that is I need to sort the results based off of the priorities for each waiting list. So if a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery and they've only applied for a 2-bedroom unit, they're still going to be behind all type 2 households for the 2-bedroom unit because the type 2 households have priority. There also could be households who were drawn higher up in the lottery above where your placement is, and they're found to be ineligible, either by the leasing office or they might just ultimately decide not to rent one of the apartments. So if your number is drawn later in the process, you shouldn't take that to mean you're not going to have the opportunity to move forward, because there is quite a few units or a few apartments available with 76 of them. And like I said, it's always the results of the lottery still need to be sorted. And I'll be sorting them right after the lottery. So the evening of the lottery, I will be sorting the results onto the waiting list. So there won't be much of a wait after the fact. You'll be able to see the sorted waiting lists later on that evening. They'll be emailed to you. And when you get that email with the waiting list, you're going to find your lottery application number on the waiting list. If you applied for both a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom, you're going to look on both of those waiting lists to find your placement on each of those lists. You'll be finding your lottery application number is what you'll be looking for. And following the lottery, we'll connect you with the leasing office, and your contact information will be provided to them. You'll also be given their contact information so you can move to the next step in the process, which is to apply for a lease through their lease screening process. So you'll have a week or so to get in touch. And so it's just a reminder that it's SCB Housing who's completing the lottery screening, the program eligibility screening, but we don't screen your household for lease eligibility. That's going to be the management team, potentially doing credit checks, rental history checks, background checks, that sort of thing. It's the same process that they will be doing for their market rate units as well. So if you are lease approved, that's the point in the process where having a position near the top of the waiting list is particularly beneficial, because you'll be the first person, if you're the top of the waiting list, you'll be the first chance to reserve one of the affordable units. So for example, if you're the first person on the 1-bedroom waiting list, you're going to have the first chance at reserving one of the affordable 1-bedroom apartments. And that's true even if someone below you on the waiting list happens to complete their lease eligibility first, because the management office is going to be honoring the order of the waiting list when they are reserving affordable units. So you'll be able to tour the units at that point and make a decision based off of whatever factors are important to you. Maybe one of the affordable apartments is located in the part of the building that you found to be best for you, or on a certain floor, or whatever it might be. So after the first person on the waiting list reserves an apartment, the second person on the waiting list who's approved will be able to choose from the remaining units, and then it goes on from there until all apartments are leased. Once you've reserved an affordable apartment, the leasing office is going to notify SEB Housing and will contact you in order to coordinate your submission of your income, asset, and tax documentation that's required at that point in order to complete your program eligibility. So remember, when you apply for this lottery, you are just self-reporting your income. But if you're one of the households later in the process who is going to be asked to move forward, that's when you have to get your information into us. So hopefully by that point, you've gathered a lot of the information that you're going to need, and you'll have about 10 days to get that into SEB Housing. There's a lot of information that's needed. So if you don't provide everything on that first attempt, that's completely fine. You'll just get an incomplete notice from SEB Housing, and you'll be given a few more days to get your information into us. So again, no worries if you don't have everything on the first try. That's typical, just because there is so much information that needs to come in. And a lot of times we have questions on what we're being sent too. So, if there's something on your pay stub or something in your bank account that we have questions on, you may need to submit additional documentation. And that's not usually a fault of your own. It's just, there's a lot of information required for to verify your eligibility for this program. So once SEB Housing approves your file, you will be notified, and the leasing office over at the Belstead will be notified as well. You'll be able to sign a lease and establish a move-in date with the leasing office. And then once you're leased, you're done with screenings until your lease renewal date. So, of course, if you sign a lease, for September, you'll be doing a renewal around, 3 months before, so, maybe around this time next year. And, of course, we hope that you have loved living there and you want to continue living there beyond the first year of your lease. If you do, you'll need to recertify your income with the leasing office prior to your lease renewal. And that means submitting, updated pay stubs and finances. And if your income has increased after that first year of living at the Belstead, and you're now above that 80% of the area median income, that's fine. Households remain eligible for the affordable housing apartment as long as their total household income doesn't exceed 140% of the area median income next year. So the amounts are listed in the information packet, the 140% figures. But as an example, a household of 2 would have qualified for this lottery with an income at or below $71,800. That same family can make up to about $100,520 at the time of their recertification next year to remain in the affordable apartment at the affordable rent. So there's some wiggle room there that the program builds in. If you get a second job, if you get a raise, if you switch jobs, or whatever it may be, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be eligible any longer for these affordable rents. And there's a question here. So, Soha, yep, let us know your question. I sent an application, but I didn't receive an email. So if you submitted your application online, that's when you would have got a immediate response just saying your application's been received by SEB Housing. Did you send it by email, or did you complete the application through the online job form link, or did you send it to us as a attachment, a PDF attachment to an email? Because if it was the latter, if you sent it by email, after we have reviewed it, you'll get a email from us, and it could take a week or a few days for us to get back to you if it was sent just to info@sebhousing.com. But like I said, if you submit it by that online application link, the job form link, you would get at least a reply saying we've received it. You'll hear from us soon. And you can submit it either way. So you can either do the online application, or you can fill out the paper or PDF application and get it to us. But that about covers what I wanted to get through from, most of this information is in the information packet that's available on SDB Housing's website if you go to the Belstead page there. And but if any questions come up, if you're watching this after the fact, or if any questions, you think of anything after this session, you can email us at info@sdbhousing.com. This is our phone number as well, the 617 number here, if you'd rather call. And so you have until July 20th to get your lottery application into us, and we look forward to receiving it. And again, any questions in the meantime, please let us know. And I'll just give it one more second here if anybody that's in attendance right now has a question. Yep, so the question here, what's the difference between mobility assisted apartments and normal ones? So let me just bring up the information packet here in terms of what we've got here. So there is looks like there's 3 mobility accessible units, one that's a 1-bedroom, one that's a 2-bedroom, one that's a 3-bedroom, and then there's also a hearing accessible and a 1-bedroom that has both hearing and mobility. So I will let either Dana or Mitchell speak to exactly what is different. My understanding is it's usually lowered counters, you're able to have grab bars in the bathroom, but I'll let you speak to what the exact differences are at the Belstead.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can certainly share pictures and share information for more specifics if you'd like to send us an email. But just in general terms, the apartments at the Belstead that are accessible will have lower countertops. The appliances are lower. So the microwave, instead of it being over the kitchen stove, it's going to be lower at counter height. The showers are a roll-in style shower. So there's no stepping over the tub ledge to get into the shower in those particular units. The doorways are slightly wider, as well as like the walkways through the apartment. So like the kitchen space might be wider to accommodate a wheelchair if that was necessary. Those are the big ones that jump out to me as the accessible features, but we can absolutely show the specific features, or if you had a question about a certain feature, I can find out the answer for that.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question here, when's the projected move-in date after all gets approved? So my understanding is the apartments are going to be ready for occupancy shortly after the lottery and any screenings that you need to do. Your exact move-in date, though, will be something that you work with the leasing office to confirm. So I don't think there's set dates or not a requirement to move in on the 1st of any month. But
our apartments in general, the first building will be available for occupancy on the 15th of August. And then there's multiple buildings on site. So each building after that will be available at a different date, about a month apart. But we accommodate move-ins on any date of the month. So as soon as your application is fully approved with SEB, we can work with you on a move-in date that would work for you.
And Dana, remind me, how many of the apartments are in that first August building?
So it's 25%. So I believe 12.
Okay, 12 affordable.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else? I'll X out of here just to remind you that info@sdbhousing.com, that is where you can get in touch with us after this call. So there's a question here. If you don't need all the mobility required things, can you get grab bars added? So I believe that would be a reasonable accommodation that you could submit to the leasing office if you needed that, and you had a need for anything that wasn't already standard in the unit.
Yep, we do have a process in place for that. There's some forms you can fill out, reasonable accommodation form to request any accommodations, including grab bars, to be added to the apartment. And we can typically accommodate that just once we do all the required paperwork.
Great. All right, if there's nothing else, like I said, any questions after this call leading up to the lottery, you can get in touch with us, SCB Housing at info@scbhousing.com, or the phone number that's here. And we look forward to getting your application. And thanks for joining in.
Thanks,
Have a good
everyone.
evening. Thanks, Dana. Bye now.